547 Mons, Belgium. A heavy mist clings to the ancient cobblestone streets, the scent of damp earth rising from the canals that crisscross the city. The first light of dawn stretches long shadows from the imposing city walls as church bells echo faintly through the dense fog. German artillerymen, their breath misting in the cool air, huddle around their massive guns, meticulously adjusting sights and cleaning the breeches. The acrid smell of gun oil hangs heavy, mingling with the morning dew. Their 105mm field guns, capable of striking targets up to 12 kilometers away, are primed to unleash a devastating barrage at a rate of 15 rounds per minute. Each crew drilled to execute rapid volleys with deadly precision. Behind them, seemingly endless lines of infantry dissolve into murky haze, bayonets catching the weak light, their packs heavy with supplies for the impending advance. The Schlieffen Plan, Germany's ambitious strategy for a swift victory, is now fully underway. Germany's hopes rest on speed and precision, a knockout blow to crush France before Russia can fully mobilize its forces. The initial objective: to swiftly envelop Belgium and surge into northern France, bypassing heavily fortified defensive lines. Commanders, their voices hushed, speak of rigid timetables and distant mile markers, convinced of the supposed weakness of the French left flank. Detailed maps, meticulously drafted, chart converging lines aimed squarely at Paris, a grand arc promising ultimate victory. However, the harsh reality of the terrain, the rolling Belgian hills, the narrow, winding roads, and the unpredictable weather, already begins to disrupt the meticulously calculated rhythm of the advance. Heavy supply wagons become mired in muddy lanes, horses struggle and slip on the slick surfaces, and the soldiers' boots sink deep into the waterlogged earth. Even before the first shots are fired in earnest, cracks begin to appear in the seemingly flawless plan. Lieutenant Hans Weber pauses to jot down his thoughts in a notebook, the ink blurring slightly in the damp air. Everything appears perfect on paper, yet the very ground beneath our feet resists us. I fear the timetable is already starting to slip. By 6:30, German reconnaissance units report sighting Belgian detachments near Liège. Artillery units immediately respond, unleashing a thunderous barrage aimed at the outer forts, some 15 kilometers distant. These fortifications, constructed of reinforced concrete, are designed to withstand direct hits, their massive cannon emplacements partially buried underground for added protection. Even 150mm shells, fired at maximum charge, detonate with limited success, causing only partial damage. Dense smoke billows across the landscape, punctuated by violent explosions that send shards of stone and debris raining down from the sky. Infantry units begin their advance behind the creeping barrage, but Belgian machine gun nests, Maxim MG-08S capable of firing a devastating 450 rounds per minute, cut down the first waves of attackers, creating gaping holes in the once perfect formations that were intended to advance in precise echelon. Panic spreads through a company as a corporal falls, struck down in the first volley. Another soldier instinctively reaches into his breast pocket, pulling out a crumpled letter and reading it with trembling hands, a note from home urging caution. The writer blissfully unaware of the brutal calculus of war unfolding around him. The Meuse River crossing. Engineers struggle desperately to erect pontoon bridges under a constant barrage of intermittent shelling. The river, swollen by recent heavy rains, surges powerfully, threatening to wash away the incomplete structures. Artillery units supporting the crossing, 75mm field guns with a range of 7 kilometers and a maximum fire rate of 20 rounds per minute, attempt to suppress enemy positions. But the Belgian defense is well prepared and strategically deep. Trenches, 2 meters deep and carefully zigzagged, provide interlocking fields of fire, maximizing defensive capabilities. Barbed wire entanglements stretch across the approaches, a cruel and silent obstacle that slows the advance to a crawl. Each step forward is paid for in blood. Casualty rates rise sharply. Entire platoons are decimated, reduced to half their original strength even before reaching the first Belgian line. Letters and personal effects are scattered across the muddy ground, grim testaments to lost lives, a faded photograph of fiancé, a dog-eared journal filled with personal thoughts, a family crest once proudly displayed. The soldiers clutch these small remnants of humanity, clinging to them as if they could somehow shield them from the deadly hail gunfire. By late morning, German High Command begins to notice the unsettling reality that the pace of the advance is far slower than anticipated. Divisions that should have already converged on the French border are still bogged down in fierce Belgian resistance. The grand sweeping movement, meticulously designed to encircle Paris, is already in serious jeopardy. The initial assumption that Belgium would quickly capitulate proves to be a tragically optimistic miscalculation. Telegraph wires cut or deliberately sabotaged further delay critical communications. Orders arrive hours late and are often conflicting, forcing commanders to improvise in real time, making critical decisions on the fly with incomplete information. The meticulously crafted schedules of the Schlieffen Plan begin to unravel quietly, but inexorably, thread by thread. In the villages near Charleroi, the chaos intensifies as the German advance encounters sporadic but determined French forces that have mobilized faster than anticipated, aided by the efficiency of the railway network and motorized transport, according to various sources. French 75mm field guns, capable of firing a blistering 16 rounds per minute, rake the advancing columns with devastating effect, and soldiers frantically dig in wherever they can find cover. Shells tear through hedgerows and decimate farmhouses, transforming the idyllic countryside into a hellscape. Smoke, dust, and the agonizing screams of the wounded mingle into a single, disorienting cloud of battle. A sergeant signals desperately with a whistle, his voice nearly drowned out by the cacophony of musketry and cannon fire. The human element, courage, fear, improvisation, begins to assert itself, disrupting a plan that was intended to be a mechanical and precise operation. By 11:30, the first major discrepancies in timing become glaringly evident. German units advancing on the right flank are significantly slowed by muddy roads, fierce resistance from Belgian fortresses, and crippling logistical congestion. Wagons laden with ammunition create massive bottlenecks, grinding the advance to a halt. Soldiers, forced to wait in tightly packed columns, grow increasingly anxious and restless, some taking desperate and risky maneuvers across exposed fields in an attempt to break free. Casualties from sniper fire and strategically placed machine gun nests mount steadily, creating gaps in the carefully planned formations that the original plan did not account for. An officer notes grimly in his journal, "We are marching blindly into a trap that is not yet visible on the map. Orders are clear, yet execution falters at every turn. The plan is beautiful in its conception, yet tragically brittle in its execution. The first phase, approach and preparation, is now revealed to be a harsh lesson in miscalculation and the unpredictable nature of war. The meticulously plotted timetables, designed to achieve rapid movement and overwhelming force, collide head-on with the unforgiving reality of the terrain, the determined resistance of the enemy, and the inherent limitations of human capabilities. Communications break down, the terrain frustrates every movement, and morale begins to fray under the strain of constant pressure. By midday, it becomes painfully clear to some field commanders that the Schlieffen Plan's initial assumptions, Belgium's swift capitulation, the frictionless advance across a wide front, and the negligible French response, were fundamentally flawed. The seeds of failure have been sown, yet the German army continues to press forward relentlessly, driven by rigid orders, the inertia of the advance, and the lingering illusion of control. Amidst the overwhelming chaos of battle, small human moments of connection persist. A soldier crouches wearily behind a shattered wall, carefully unwrapping a chocolate bar that he has carried with him since leaving Germany. He shares it silently with a comrade, a fleeting moment of comfort and shared humanity against the relentless grind of artillery fire and gunfire. Letters from home, once neatly folded and carefully preserved, are now muddied and torn, but they serve as a powerful reminder of why these men march, of the lives waiting for them beyond the horrors of the battlefield. These instances, brief as they are, serve to highlight the stark contrast between the precise geometry of the plan and the messy, unpredictable reality of war. By late afternoon, German commanders are forced to confront the grim realization that the plan's strict timeline simply cannot be met. Adjustments are desperately suggested, but the sheer size and weight of the advancing army make rapid corrections exceedingly difficult. Every deviation from the original plan compounds the next, creating a cascading effect that threatens to overwhelm the entire operation in the coming days. What was intended as a swift and decisive envelopment begins to feel more and more like a grinding slog through unexpectedly fierce resistance that was always tragically underestimated. The first day, from early dawn to the late afternoon, offers a stark and sobering picture. Preparation and approach, though meticulously planned in theory, collide brutally with the unyielding forces of the real world. Terrain, logistics, weather, enemy determination, and the limitations of human endurance conspire to expose the vulnerabilities inherent in the Schlieffen Plan. Each misstep, each delayed order, each unforeseen obstacle chips away relentlessly at the clockwork precision envisioned by German High Command. By 1800 hours, as the sun begins to dip behind the distant hills, the battered army halts to regroup, its forward momentum curtailed, its timetable torn to shreds, and the first seeds of calamitous miscalculation firmly planted in the muddy ground. The stage is now set for the unfolding tragedy. A plan that promised rapid victory is now a fragile framework, threatened on all sides by the unpredictable element of war and the unwavering resilience of those it sought to crush. 7:03, near Charleroi, Belgium. The morning fog slowly lifts, gradually revealing the broken landscape of scarred fields, tangled hedgerows, and small, ruined villages. German divisions, still stretched in along muddy roads, encounter the first substantial and determined French resistance. The French have mobilized with surprising speed, far exceeding initial expectations. Their 75mm field guns fire relentlessly, unleashing a blistering 16 rounds per minute, the shells tearing into the advancing columns with devastating effect. Smoke billows and curls over the hedgerows, mingling with the pungent scent of wet earth and acrid gunpowder, creating a suffocating atmosphere. German infantry struggles to maintain formation under the intense fire, bayonets fixed and ready, but the unforgiving terrain, a treacherous mix of trenches, barbed wire, and collapsed bridges, forces units into irregular and vulnerable patterns. Each step forward is met with a deadly hail of machine gun fire from strategically positioned Maxim MG-08s, capable of firing a staggering 450 rounds per minute, mowing down soldiers who had confidently expected a clean and rapid advance. Corporal Friedrich Bauer huddles desperately behind a shattered wall, mud smeared across his uniform, clutching tightly to a faded photograph of his beloved fiancée. Around him, his comrades stumble and fall, some limping from shrapnel wounds, others whispering hurried prayers amidst the deafening chaos. The Schlieffen Plan's elegant arcs, meticulously drawn on maps in comfortable Berlin offices far from the front lines, dissolve into fragmented and disjointed movement. Orders arrive hours late, transmitted via unreliable and often delayed telegraph lines, forcing commanders to improvise as best they can, making desperate decisions on the fly with incomplete and outdated information. Smoke, dust, and the agonizing screams of the wounded combine to form a disorienting fog, making it almost impossible to distinguish friend from foe in the swirling chaos. This is no longer the calculated and precise sweep envisioned in the planning stages. It is now a brutal test of human endurance and desperate improvisation. The assault intensifies dramatically. German artillery, 105mm and 150mm guns, firing at their maximum rates, attempt to suppress French positions with a thunderous barrage, but the defenders are well prepared, deeply entrenched in zigzag trenches that provide overlapping fields of fire, maximizing their defensive capabilities. Barbed wire entanglements stretch across the approaches, a silent but lethally effective obstacle. Soldiers attempting to cut through the wire are met with a storm of bullets from hidden and well-defended positions. Casualty rates spike sharply, with entire platoons decimated, reduced to half their original strength before even reaching the first French line. Amidst the chaos and carnage, letters and personal items are scattered across the muddy ground, grim reminders of lost lives and shattered dreams, dog-eared journals filled with personal reflections, faded photographs of loved ones, cherished family crests. Soldiers clutch these remnants of their former lives, clinging to them as a fragile connection to a world beyond the horrors of the battlefield. By 9:30, German units attempting to flank the French positions encounter massive bottlenecks, grinding their advance to a standstill. Supply wagons pile up haphazardly, further slowing the already agonizingly slow advance. Horses struggle desperately through muddy fields, slipping and falling on the treacherous terrain. Engineers hastily construct pontoon bridges across swiftly flowing streams, but the strong currents threaten to wash them away before they can be completed. Artillery fire is sporadic and often inaccurate due to persistent visibility issues caused by smoke and fog. Lieutenant Hans Weber makes a somber entry in his journal. Our meticulously planned timetable is crumbling before our eyes. Every meter gained forward costs dearly in blood. The plan, so precise and elegant on paper, dies a slow and agonizing death in the mud of this unforgiving land. The French, benefiting from shorter interior lines of communication and supply, are able to quickly reinforce any weak points in their defensive lines. Motorized transport and the efficient rail network allow battalions to redeploy within hours, while German columns are stretched dangerously thin over miles of congested roads. By 10:45, chaos reigns supreme. Soldiers struggle to maintain any semblance of cohesion. Some break ranks and desperately seek cover, while others advance blindly into withering enemy fire. Orders are shouted frantically over the din of battle, whistles shrill and piercing, but the overwhelming noise and confusion often render them completely ineffective. The human element, courage, fear, hesitation, improvisation, asserts itself forcefully over any semblance of strategic planning. A particularly fierce and brutal engagement erupts near a farmhouse on the outskirts of town. French infantry, concealed behind rubble and strategically placed hedges, unleash a devastating volley of fire as a German company approaches. Artillery shells fall perilously short, showering the advancing troops with mud and debris. Sergeant Klaus Richter signals frantically with his whistle, attempting to rally his men, but a deafening din of machine guns and cannons completely drowns out his voice. Some soldiers, pinned down by the intense fire, huddle together under the wreckage of the farmhouse, exchanging whispered words of comfort while clutching desperately to personal effects. Photographs of loved ones, letters from home, even a child's toy that had been carefully carried from Germany. These fleeting moments of shared humanity punctuate the relentless grind of battle, offering a brief respite from the surrounding horror. By noon, German High Command receives fragmented and often contradictory reports. The right flank is significantly delayed by a combination of obstacles and unexpectedly fierce Belgian resistance. The center is held up by heavy and sustained French fire, and critical supply issues are exacerbating an already dire situation. The plan's timeline, intended to swiftly envelop Paris and secure a decisive victory, is already impossible to maintain. Every deviation from the original plan compounds the next, creating a cascading series of failures. Adjustments must be made on the fly, often based on incomplete or outdated information, further contributing to the overall chaos and uncertainty. The mechanical precision envisioned in Berlin is shattered by the harsh realities of human limitations, logistical nightmares, and the unforgiving environmental conditions. Formations collapsing. The German advance falters significantly in several key sectors. Trenches, barbed wire entanglement, and accurate and sustained French fire combine to stall their momentum, bringing the offensive to a grinding halt. Units attempt to push forward in small, isolated groups, creating gaps that French soldiers immediately exploit, further disrupting the German lines. Casualties mount at an alarming rate. Medics struggle desperately to reach the wounded, often under continuous and withering enemy fire. Shell craters become both impromptu graves and desperate shelters for the exhausted and terrified soldiers. Artillery attempts to break the French resistance, but communication delays mean that barges often fall short of their intended targets or, even worse, overlap with friendly lines, causing further casualties and confusion. An officer scribbles a desperate note. The plan assumes order and discipline, yet disorder reigns supreme. Our beautiful envelopment is now nothing more than a patchwork of desperate improvisation. By mid-afternoon, soldiers report witnessing strange and moving human moments amidst the overwhelming chaos. A young private sharing a meager chocolate bar with a wounded comrade, letters from home being read aloud to distract from the incessant gunfire, brief smiles flickering across faces as men attempt to wipe the mud and grime from their faces. These fragments of normalcy, small and insignificant as they may seem, contrast sharply with the merciless rhythm of artillery fire and the constant threat of death. The battlefield is no longer a predictable machine operating according to a predetermined plan. It has become a living, breathing entity, filled with fear, courage, and a desperate need for improvisation. Tactical realization dawns. German commanders begin to comprehend the full scope of the disaster that is unfolding. Roads are hopelessly congested. Supply lines are overstretched to the breaking point, and units are fragmented and isolated. The French are firmly entrenched, holding key crossings and vital junctions, and are effectively counterattacking wherever German forces show any signs of weakness. Every hour lost further erodes the plan's intended advantages. Speed, surprise, and overwhelming force concentrated on the French left flank. The initial assumptions, Belgium's quick capitulation, negligible resistance from the Allies, and a frictionless advance across the countryside, proved to be tragically flawed and based on wishful thinking rather than sound intelligence. Field commanders adapt as best they can, but the momentum has been irrevocably interrupted, and a cascading effect of delays threatens the entire success of the operation. By late afternoon, the first real test of endurance emerges. Soldiers, exhausted beyond measure, soaked to the bone and under constant enemy fire, dig shallow foxholes wherever they can find a patch of relatively safe ground. Each exploding shell and passing bullet serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of the meticulously crafted plan and the ever-present threat of death. The human cost of the failed offensive becomes painfully clear. Entire companies reduce to skeletal formations, officers making life-or-death decisions under extreme stress, and small acts of individual courage standing out against a backdrop of overwhelming confusion and despair. The Schlieffen Plan, once hailed as a model of theoretical perfection, collides violently with the unpredictable realities of war. As the sun begins to lower in the sky, casting long, ominous shadows over the shattered villages and muddy fields, German commanders convene brief and hurried discussions, attempting to salvage what they can from the wreckage of their ambitious plan. The plan's original timeline cannot be salvaged. Adjustments are absolutely necessary, but the sheer size and inertia of the army, combined with the complex and unforgiving terrain, severely limit their options. Each corrective measure taken is imperfect, delayed, and ultimately incomplete. The grand strategy of rapid envelopment, designed to end the war swiftly before Russia could fully mobilize, is now in serious jeopardy. The first day of battle has revealed a stark and unavoidable truth: meticulous planning, without fully accounting for the unpredictable human element, the harsh realities of the environment, and the crippling challenges of logistics, is ultimately insufficient to guarantee victory. The second phase, chaotic engagement, is a harsh and unforgiving lesson in the limitations of theoretical strategy. Terrain, supply, morale, communication, and the unwavering resilience of the enemy intersect to undermine the Schlieffen Plan's initial assumptions, leading to its inevitable failure. Yet, despite the overwhelming evidence of failure, the German army persists, driven forward by rigid orders, ingrained discipline, and the faint but persistent hope that superior speed and strength can somehow compensate for the multitude of miscalculations. Amidst the destruction and confusion, fleeting human moments, shared chocolate bars, treasured letters from home, whispered words of encouragement, serve as powerful reminders to the soldiers of why they fight and what they are fighting for. The stage is set for the next critical phase, whether the Schlieffen Plan will collapse entirely, leading to complete and utter defeat, or whether a series of improbable breakthroughs can somehow salvage a desperate situation. 6:12, near Mons, Belgium. A biting, chill wind sweeps across the scarred fields, carrying with the unmistakable metallic scent of blood and the ever-present odor of wet earth. German troops, utterly exhausted from the chaotic engagement of the previous day, grimly prepare to resume the offensive. A thick fog lingers low to ground, partially obscuring the uneven terrain, the numerous shell craters, and the scattered remnants of shattered villages. Engineers work feverishly to repair bridges and fill gaps in the defensive trenches, desperately trying to facilitate the planned advance. The 105mm and 150mm artillery pieces, now heavily smudged with mud and soot, fire intermittently, attempting to suppress the remaining French defensive positions. While the guns boast a maximum range of 12 kilometers and a firing rate of up to 15 rounds per minute, the uneven terrain significantly disrupts coordination and precision, rendering their fire less effective. The Schlieffen Plan, once a blueprint of near-perfect timing and execution, teeters precariously on the brink of complete collapse. By 7 o'clock, the first unmistakable signs of breakdown are clearly evident. German columns are scattered and disorganized. Some units advance too rapidly, exposing their flanks to enemy fire, while others lag far behind due to heavily bottlenecked roads and deliberately destroy bridges. The French, exploiting their shorter interior lines of communication and their superior knowledge of the terrain, launch a series of well-coordinated counterattacks, utilizing their highly effective 75mm field guns firing at a blistering rate of 16 rounds per minute. Deep trenches, 2 meters in depth, strategically placed wire entanglements, and carefully positioned machine gun nests force the Germans into pockets of exposed vulnerability, where they are mercilessly cut down. Casualty rates rise sharply, with entire companies reduced to skeletal formations, their ranks decimated by enemy fire. Soldiers clutch desperately at photographs and cherish letters from home, a poignant and desperate reminder why they continue to move forward despite the relentless and overwhelming fire. The human cost of the failed offensive is undeniable. Morale strains under the weight of exhaustion, fear, and the constant and steady drip of devastating losses. The chaotic surge forward. German forces push forward in fragmented and disorganized groups, desperately attempting to regain the initiative. Artillery shells explode in overlapping barges, occasionally landing far too close to their own men due to persistent miscommunication and faulty targeting. Smoke, mud, and the agonizing screams of the wounded create a sensory overload, overwhelming the already exhausted and terrified soldiers. Lieutenant Hans Weber records his thoughts in his journal. The plan, so elegant and precise on paper, disintegrates with every step we take. The battlefield breeds chaos. Only desperate improvisation keeps us alive. Soldiers frantically take cover in shell craters, abandoned farmhouses, and overturned carts, seeking any form of protection from the relentless enemy fire. Whistles blow incessantly, orders are shouted frantically, but the overwhelming noise and pervasive confusion often render them completely ineffective. The human element, courage, panic, and raw instinct, completely dominates any semblance of strategic planning. By 9:50, German command begins to realize the grim truth that the initial momentum cannot be fully regained. The right flank is significantly delayed by persistent Belgian resistance. The center falters against organized and sustained French fire. Critical supply shortages, ammunition, food, and essential medical aid compound the already dire situation, further undermining the German war effort. Engineers struggle valiantly to maintain pontoon bridges under constant enemy fire. The strong current of the rivers threaten to sweep the fragile structures away. Small victories, such as the temporary capture of a small village or the taking of a forward trench, are quickly offset by heavy losses and immediate and devastating French counterattacks. Officers are forced to make split-second decisions, often without complete or accurate information, further highlighting the inherent fragility of the initial plan. The turning point is reached. German troops approach a strategic crossroads, where French units have concentrated their forces in anticipation of the attack. Machine guns fire relentlessly, unleashing a devastating 450 rounds per minute, mowing down exposed soldiers with ruthless efficiency. Artillery, despite its superior range and volume of fire, cannot effectively neutralize the entrenched defenders. Units attempting to flank the French positions are quickly pinned down, leading to disorganized and often panicky retreats. A sergeant, sharing a meager piece of chocolate with a wounded private, gestures grimly toward the enemy lines, signaling a grim determination to continue to fight despite the overwhelming odds. Letters from home are read aloud amidst the incessant gunfire, providing a fleeting moment of human connection against the deafening and mechanical roar of battle. The Schlieffen Plan's intended swift encirclement has degenerated into a brutal and grinding war of attrition. By early afternoon 1310, it is painfully clear that the plan's grand envelopment is failing miserably. German units are overextended, isolated, and suffering from crippling communication breakdowns. French reinforcements move quickly along well-established rail lines, effectively stabilizing threatened sectors and preventing any further German gains. Engineers struggle desperately to lay new barbed wire and repair damaged trenches. Every action is fiercely contested by the determined French defenders. Casualties continue to mount at an alarming rate. Medical personnel operate under constant threat of enemy fire, struggling valiantly to save lives in the midst of the carnage. The battlefield has become a patchwork of shattered units, dense smoke and thick mud. Lieutenant Weber reflects somberly. We are no longer masters of the battlefield, but mere passengers subject to its capricious will. Our precision is gone. Only survival matters now. Collapse or desperate adaptation. The German High Command convenes under makeshift and inadequate conditions, desperately attempting to salvage the situation. Adjustments are attempted, redistributing troops, concentrating artillery fire, but options are severely limited by the unforgiving terrain, the staggering number of casualties, and the pervasive sense of fatigue that has gripped the army. The right wing, intended to sweep around Paris in a decisive maneuver, is significantly slowed by persistent Belgian and French resistance. The left wing is unable to compensate for this failure. Each delay creates a ripple effect, further jeopardizing the entire encirclement. The plan's initial assumptions, a rapid advance, weak opposition, and minimal friction, proved to be disastrously incorrect, leading to the current state of near collapse. Field commanders improvised defensive positions in an attempt to consolidate what little gains they had made, but the critical momentum has been irrevocably lost. The theoretical perfection of the Schlieffen Plan gives way to the chaotic and brutal reality of war. By 1730, German troops begin to dig in, utterly exhausted and thoroughly demoralized. Trenches are hastily reinforced. Artillery shifts to defensive positions, preparing for a French counterattack. Units reduced by half or more attempt to maintain some semblance of cohesion, clinging to the hope of survival. Soldiers huddle in shell craters, clutching personal mementos, photos of loved ones, treasured letters from home, small trinkets that remind them of a life beyond the battlefield. The battlefield is both a stage of unspeakable human suffering and a testament to fleeting moments of individual courage. German officers understand grimly that even if the army manages to continue to advance tomorrow, the initial plan's critical elements of speed, surprise, and decisive envelopment have been irretrievably lost. The Schlieffen Plan, conceived as a highly efficient mechanism for rapid victory, has been undone by a complex combination of human factors, unforeseen environmental challenges, and the unexpected resilience of the enemy. Consequences and legacy. As darkness falls, the battlefield slowly quiets, punctuated only by intermittent shelling and the watchful eyes of sentries on guard duty. Maps are reviewed. Commanders painstakingly note which sectors failed, and which desperate adjustments were only partially successful. The failure of the initial envelopment forces Germany into a protracted and costly conflict on two fronts, a scenario that the Schlieffen Plan was specifically designed to avoid. Significant strategic lessons begin to emerge from the carnage. Meticulous planning, however thorough, cannot adequately substitute for adaptability, accurate assessment of the terrain, and the inherent unpredictability of human behavior. Technology, artillery range, firing rate, trench depth, cannot alone guarantee success on the battlefield. The brutal reality of the battlefield has clearly illustrated the limitations of theoretical designs when confronted with the complex realities of war. The memory of this catastrophic failure shapes German military thought for decades to come, a careful balance between rigid planning and operational flexibility, the paramount importance of secure and reliable supply lines, and the critical role of the human factor in the successful execution of any military operation. Amidst the wreckage and despair, fleeting human moments of connection persist. A soldier selflessly shares his last rations with a wounded comrade. A treasured letter is carefully tucked into a coat pocket, offering a small measure of comfort. A faded photograph watches silently as men march toward an uncertain fate. These small acts of kindness and shared humanity contrast sharply with the overarching chaos and destruction, highlighting the enduring truth that even in the face of failed plans and overwhelming odds, human endurance, courage, and the need for connection endure. The Schlieffen Plan's collapse is not simply a military event. It is a profound lesson in the inherent fragility of assumptions and the fundamental unpredictability of war. Its legacy will reverberate through history, informing military doctrine, technological development, and the collective memory of generations to come. By midnight, the army is positioned roughly where the Schlieffen Plan predicted it should have been by dawn. However, the cost has been enormous. Tens of thousands of casualties, a severely disrupted momentum, and a shattered sense of morale. The dream of a swift and decisive victory has evaporated, replaced by the harsh and unforgiving reality of trench warfare, crippling logistical strain, and a prolonged and attritional conflict that will test the limits of human endurance. The German High Command recalibrates its strategy, acutely aware that this failure is the first major miscalculation of the war, and that the battlefields of France and Belgium will demand far more than maps and meticulously crafted timetables. They will demand human resilience, desperate improvisation, and an acceptance of the inherent chaos of war. The stage is set for prolonged stalemate on the Western Front, the rapid evolution of modern warfare, and the hard-earned lessons that would shape military strategy for years to come. The Schlieffen Plan, elegant in its conception but tragic in its execution, leaves behind a landscape of mud, blood, and shattered expectations, a stark and enduring testament to the limitations of even the most meticulously detailed planning in the face of human reality.